Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. This is your English class and I'm your subject teacher, Miss Fazia Naz. Yesterday we talked about hope and aspiration. That is unit 2. This unit contains 3 readings. I Have a Dream. This is a speech by Martin Luther King. Glory and Hope. Again a speech by Nelson Mandela. I Dream a World. This is again a poem written by a black person. So all these 3 readings are actually about the racial discrimination. So over here we have to start with reading selection 2.1, that is I Have a Dream. This is by Martin Luther King. In this lesson there is an emphasis on the negation of racial segregation in the society. So writer wanted to make us realize that a nation cannot enjoy the glory of democracy without treating all the sections of community, rich and poor, high and low, white and black, equally. And one should not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So as this speech is delivered by Martin Luther King, we must know who the Martin Luther King was. I told you people, when he was born, he was assassinated, he was an activist, he was a humanitarian. He was a person who had won Nobel Prize because of his work, because of his devotion and dedication, the way he wanted to bring change, a social change in a peaceful way in the American society. He worked for the equality and injustice for all the Americans of all colors. So for all these things, he had been awarded with the Nobel Prize on 14th October 1964. Then I told you about this speech, that this one was the public speech, and it was a procession where 250,000 people, they had attended, they had been there at Lincoln Memorial, the place where it was conducted. It was held, it was Lincoln Memorial, and it was held on 28th August 1963. Okay, then I told you that what is the main message of the speech. The main message was that a nation cannot enjoy the glory of democracy without treating all the sections of community equally. So he demanded for freedom, he demanded for equality, what the Afro-Americans deserve in America. Then I told you about the compositional strategies and techniques. The first of the speech, it points out not an idealized American dream, but a picture of a seething American nightmare of racial injustice. Then the second half of the speech, it paints the theme of a better, fairer future of racial harmony and integration. Then I told you about the figurative language that has been used in the speech in order to pay emphasis, in order to put his words into the heart of the reader, into the heart of the public. He had used the figurative language, and the devices he had used in that language is that of metaphor, parallelism, repetition, and rhetorical technique. When we will read this speech, we will come to know that where he had used the words metaphorically in order to put an impact on the mind of the listeners, on the mind of the readers. Then he has also drawn the parallelism in order to make the situation, in order to make the comparison more authentic. With the repetition of the words, with the rhetorical techniques, he actually tried to emphasize what he wanted to say. We had done the reading of these paragraphs. I'm going to do it again for you people. I told you that he repeated the words and phrases. Over here you can see 5 score years ago. A great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to the millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. So, 50 years ago, he is talking about some 100 years ago. He was talking about a great American. Who was that? He was Abraham Lincoln. He had been standing at Lincoln Memorial, right? And over there, standing under the shadow of the Abraham Lincoln, actually, that is a symbolism he had used over here. The word shadow is used as symbolically that 100 years before Abraham Lincoln, he had fought for the black people, for their rights. They have been searing in the flames of withering injustice. They had been actually not treated equally. They have been treated like slaves some 100 years before. So Abraham Lincoln, he worked for the justice, for the equality, for the freedom of the black people, and as a result he signed Emancipation Proclamation. Proclamation is the announcement, emancipation is the freedom announcement. He signed a freedom decree for the black people, and because of this decree, because of this order that has become momentous in the history, the slaves, they got freedom, and they got the equal rights according to that decree, according to that proclamation, according to that public announcement. And before that, what was the condition of the black people? They had been searing. Searing means that they have been burning. Actually, they were not burning. That is the metaphorical use of the words, as this inequality and injustice does not make the man to stand equally with the rest of the people. So this was a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity, right? They were under chains of slavery. So this announcement, this decree, it was kind of a joyous daybreak. A new day had started with the new light and new ray of hope for them. So over here, he was talking about Abraham Lincoln, who was a great American who worked for the black people and who had signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which promised the equal rights and justice for the black people. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro's lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize an appalling condition. So over here, Martin Luther King used the rhetorical technique over here. You can see 100 years later in first line, and second line, and fourth line, and sixth line, and yes, 6 times he used the same phrase, same words, in order to put emphasis on this thing, that even after the 100 years when this proclamation was signed, nothing has been changed. Negro are still not free. The life of the Negroes are still crippled by the manacles of segregations, this racism, this difference of black and white. Actually, these are handlocks, these are the handcuffs, these are the chains, these are the manacles. And black people, because of these chains of segregation, of differences, they are still crippling, they are still deprived of their rights. And these are the chains of discrimination, right? And discrimination is inequality was there. Discrimination is that there was no justice for them in the society. When the white people and the black people, they had been living in the same country and they have been the citizens of the same country, but they were not given the equal rights because of the discrimination of the black and white color, because of the segregation. So these were like the chains, these were like the hand locks, and they had been deprived of their due rights. So even after 100 years later, they live on an island of poverty in the midst of the vast ocean of material prosperity. America is a very prosperous country, and they had been enjoying all the facilities of life, and their citizens, they have the equal rights to enjoy all that prosperity that the country have. But these Negroes, they are living in the midst of that prosperity on the island of the poverty. Their life is pathetic. They have been living in poverty. So 100 years later, they are still languishing, they are still suffering. And as they have been living in an exile, as they have not been living in their own country, as they have been pushed away from their own country, they have been living in an exile. So what he said over here, that we all gathered over here in order to dramatize this alarming condition, in order to bring it forward, in order to make it clear before the public that the way these citizens of America have been living in their own country in a deprived way, in a crippling way, over here we have to dramatize this thing, this alarming condition before the world. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, black men as well as the white man, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuits of happiness. So again, he used the metaphors over here. He doesn't mean that America has a lot of money and they have a check in their hand and they wanted to cash that check. This is not the situation. Actually, with the use of these words, actually metaphorically he had used these words. He wanted to say that America is a prosperous country. They have lot of opportunities for all the citizens of America, and even in the Constitution, in the Declaration of Independence, a promissory note, kind of a note where the promise has been written that all the people will be treated equally, and all the Americans, they will take it as their legacy that everyone would be treated equally. So their rights, the black people and the white people, would guarantee the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuits of happiness. Unalienable means that undefiable. So they have the right to live a happy life, to live in liberty, and they have the right to pursue for their happiness. So what does he want to say? He said that America had a lot of opportunities for all its citizens. It's a prosperous country. It has a lot of money. Why the Negroes, they have been living in poverty? So he said that we poor people, we have come and gathered over here in order to make the nation realize that we have come to cash a check. We have come to get our equal rights, and those who made that country, those who had shaped that country, they had written the magnificent words in the Constitution and in the Declaration of Independence. They had signed a promissory note where America, to which every American was called higher, and that was that all black men and the white men, they have the equal rights. Over here, glossary is given, words meaning are given. Then it is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great walls of opportunity of this nation. Okay, over here he again criticized the American country, that as a country they defaulted, they failed to fulfill this promissory note where the equal right has been promised for all the citizens of America, irrespective of their color and creed. So he said that as the American citizens, they should honor this sacred obligation. They should give respect to this promissory note. So America or American people or the government, they had failed to fulfill these promises. They had given a bad check, and a bad check that was refused by the bank because it was marked insufficient funds. So again, metaphorically, he used these words. Bad check doesn't mean that it was a check that could not be cashed. It was a check that had insufficient balance. It wasn't like that. It was that it's a rich country, and this rich country, this prosperous country, is not ready to give justice to the black people. So that is why he said that this was the bad check, and it had shown that there is no fund for the black people. So it was bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great wars of opportunities of this nation. So what does Martin Luther King emphasize over here? That we refuse to agree on this thing, that there is no opportunity for the black people of America in the country, because this country is very prosperous, and in its compartments, in its safe compartments, there are a lot of opportunities for his nation, for his people. So we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us on demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hollow spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take tranquilizing drug of gradualism. So what does he say over here? He criticized the government in a very sophisticated way, by using the metaphors, by using these words actually with the calmness of and the peace of mind. He had criticized the government where the white people, they are not ready to give them the rights. So he was telling them that this is the urgency of the there's the urgency of now, means now there's the time to fulfill all the promises which were done 100 years before. And he was telling them that you people are lost in luxury, you are in view to chill out, you are in the view to calm down, and everything would be done gradually. But he said that all these excuses are now not valid. There is the fierce urgency of now. So he said that we had come over here, we have gathered over here at this hallowed spot, at this sacred place over here at Lincoln Memorial to remind the government, the white people, that this was the place where 100 years before a great American had given the rights to the black people. So again we gathered over here to remind the white people of their promise. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now this is the time to open the doors of opportunity to all God's children. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. So students, what you people do, you will underline all the words which are repeated over here. Now is the time, now is the time. All these words, when you will utter, you will come to know that with the repetition of these words, actually he tried to emphasize on this thing, that end the segregation. Now there is no extra time for the white people to take and to chill out to cool off or to calm down, and to say that gradually the black people will take their rights. So there is no way to linger on the promise that black people are the part of the country. So he demanded all these things from the white people. Again, there is a glossary for you people, and today I end my lecture over here. I hope that it would be clear for you people. And there is a quotation from Martin Luther King Jr. Read it and act on it. Thank you very much for today.